I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Deanne Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
and what do we do about it?
Well, hello.
Hello.
Um,
This conversation is dropping on a day that might be solemn, to say the least, to say the very least.
yeah.
Uh, but again, an important thing for us to be recognizing. You're always representing support for the folks of Palestine. And we're seeing that there's so much going on now with advances in Israel. So, and then you wanted to kind of get into that. And so,
I don't think so many folks didn't think it would go this long, didn't think it would go a year with no seeming end in sight for sure. And as we speak, the situation is escalating, has been escalating for a few weeks now, with Israel sending bombs into Lebanon. That has escalated just these past couple of days. But then last week, I believe it was, you may have read about the pager bombing incident where they rigged
mhm,
the
all of
pagers to
this.
explode and several hundred people were injured and killed, a lot of them children, because nobody knew the pagers were targeted to explode. And so, and of course, Israel didn't know who was going to be holding them when they did explode. They just, and it's really scary to think of the technology that it takes to do that, you know. And I haven't heard any really concrete, I've heard theories floated around about how they did that, how they were able to secure that, but I'm not sure they've totally understood how it was done, whether it was, you know, some sort of device that was put into the pagers at the manufacturing, which would suggest some collusion or some working together with where the pagers were manufactured, or if it was a kind of a malware technological,
Computer code.
you
Yeah.
know, that was put into the brain of the electronic brain of the pagers that was able to be triggered or detonated
Hmm.
remotely. So I haven't read anything specifically that suggests that they know exactly how it was done, but it's really scary to think that that kind of technology exists, that something that we all walk around with, that we all function with, could be weaponized in that way. So that was really scary. And so, yeah, there's a lot of escalation right now with Lebanon and Iran, Hezbollah, and the narrative that I'm hearing is largely still that continuation of Israel is the victim. Israel has a right to defend itself. When, if we think about the timeline that's been happening over this past year, not only have they been decimating Gaza and have moved into decimating the West Bank, in the areas where Palestinians have been regulated to live, but they've also been attacking Lebanon. They've been attacking, you know, the Golan Heights. They've been attacking Iran. And so it's so interesting to me to hear this narrative about how they have the right to defend themselves, that I'm screaming at the you know, at my phone, that's, I'm hearing these voices coming out of talking about how victimized they are, and it's like they started it. They've been the ones that have been escalating all of this. And the concept of distraction, the concept of creating a greater threat within that region so that they can continue this narrative of being the victims, because all of us are watching what they're doing in Gaza. And even though the narrative still sounds like they're the victims, they had the right to defend themselves because of October 7th, that narrative is failing, you know, in the greater public domain. A lot of people are like, I call bullshit. You've been destroying this area for almost a year now, and that doesn't look like defense to me. So I'll stop talking and see what your thoughts are, and where you are with all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Just thinking about how time goes, right? And just that we are a year of watching this level of devastation happen in a community is time is flying by, one, two, and then we're watching continuous destruction. We know that the focal point has been Palestine and what Israel is doing there. There's still conversation about what's happening, in Ukraine and Russia's advancement. And during the presidential debate, they're talking about what a third world war could look like. We're watching where allyship is happening, which countries are sending people in support and allyship of like these kind of aggressive advances and or actual defending and protecting
Right.
oneself and territory. And so, yeah, thinking about all of those things as we are coming up to our election and knowing that the US does hold a narrative power, I'm going to say now, like I'm going to name it narrative power more than actual hard power. And our soft power is completely becoming eroded because though it is Israel advancing, it's also the US advancing because we are the ones that are providing the opportunity for Israel to continue to do the devastation and agitation that's happening now. And really trying to understand what are what this looks like for the end game of kind of domination and control,
Yeah.
right? Because if you're causing this level of like conflict and violence, we know that tons of money comes from warfare because you need machines, you need ammunition, you need people,
Mhm.
all
Yeah.
of the things that generates a certain economy. They're already talking about drafts. And what does this look like as like our policies within the United States are modeling a certain lack of democracy as we're watching kind of this affront across different territories in nature. Like for me, it's just becoming a about to bubble over volcano,
Mm,
um, right? And then like
that's what it feels like for sure.
within the context of like when a volcano erupts, trying to get run for cover is very
Right.
difficult. Very difficult.
Yeah, and that brings up for me the thought of tectonic plates shifting,
Hmm.
earthquakes, and I think energetically a lot of us are feeling that. We're
Yep.
feeling we've been watching this live stream genocide on our phones for a year.
Hmm.
We've been marching and calling our representatives and protesting and trying to get somebody to listen that has any kind of power to shift what's happening over there. And there's a lot of fatigue. There's a lot of in the circles that I'm running in of folks that are trying to be active in getting this to shift. There's a lot of exhaustion around it and heartbreak and really fighting that sense of it's all beyond our control, and so therefore we just need to put our heads under the sheet and just because there's nothing we can do about it, which is what they want. That's what the power dynamic wants. They want us to get tired, and they want us to lose hope and lose focus. And I know we're going to talk about distractions a little bit. It's just it's such a classic deployment of resources to create distractions that give us something else to focus on, so that maybe we'll forget this, oh, look at that shiny object while you're missing what's happening over here. And yeah, I think in this country, at least on I'm on Turtle Island, I'm in on US soil. And so I'm feeling a lot of that, the rhetoric coming out of the Republican nominee for president, Donald Trump, is escalating. I saw some clips of things that he's been saying at rallies lately, and
Oh,
yeah,
like what? What is he talking about?
oh, talking about how he described, and I saw a clip, so I just want to say I didn't say the whole thing, but
You don't have the whole context of it.
right,
Yeah.
but he was talking about how he wished that we could just let our police have a day of extreme violence, and it would be like a purge, and then there wouldn't be any criminals anymore. I mean, he said that. He was on a microphone at a rally, and he was describing how he just thinks that if we just let the police run amok without any threat of consequence to their behavior, that we just 24, 48 hours and we wouldn't have any more criminals anymore because they would have wiped them off the map. And in very purge like fashion, if you've heard of that movie.
Yes, I've heard of the movie. It's purely ridiculous.
Mm,
So, number A, let's say that.
yeah,
It's completely and purely ridiculous.
yeah.
And what is the accounting for the human component of people who are in law enforcement who are also criminals?
Yeah, no component of that. I mean, clearly coming from that, his mouth and his perspective, he's thinking of the cops as all good guys, and everybody else that doesn't fall within his mindset, the bad guys. And that includes, they've been making the immigrants, there's, I think we talked before about the that he brought it up during the presidential debate, the theory, the conspiracy theory about Haitian immigrant migrants, eating people's pets, and that conspiracy theory that's been circulating. And so I feel like he was building off of that, just it just seems like the othering has gone to such an intense level, and it feels like it's expanding. It's like a bubble that just keeps growing and encompassing other groups of people that aren't normally or aren't typically in our caste system, in our society, and the way it operates, aren't typically caught up in that bubble of being othered, which says to me that it just escalates the violence against anyone that might look like you or that might be classically in that bubble of othering. All bets are off in terms of how, I mean, it is just his call for violence, state sanctioned violence, at a time where just recently saw the state of Missouri execute Marcellus Williams when there a black man who was accused of murder, I believe, and he had been exonerated. I mean, the DNA had proven his innocence. There's evidence of the prosecutors mishandling the murder weapon. There's all kind, I mean, the prosecutor, the victim's family, were loudly screaming that this man did not deserve to be killed, and after spending 20 plus years already in the carceral system for this crime that he didn't commit, and the governor refused to deny it. It went to the state Supreme Court. They refused to stop the execution. It went all the way to the US Supreme Court,
Presidency.
and they,
Mhm.
and of course across conservative versus liberal lines, voted to, yes, indeed, let's kill this man, that all the evidence points to his innocence, and they did it. And it just, yeah, the
And the young person they found in what, Tennessee hanging?
yes, it was North Carolina. It was Henderson.
Oh, it was North Carolina.
Yeah.
I thought it was Tennessee. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, hmm Hearing all of these things, what does it mean for you? And like, if we're going back to the beginning of this conversation and thinking about what we are watching happening with Israel and in Palestine, I'm gonna call it what it is. And we're watching what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine, and we're watching what's happening in the Congo, and we're watching what's happening in the United States, because let's call it what it is, because we're seeing it actually happening again.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna repeat myself to bring awareness that political projects are occurring,
Yeah.
and they are being scaled across the globe. We're not hearing about all of them in our news. I'm in a different place. I can't even figure out how to get the Jamaican news. I just can't figure out how to get it yet. So I don't know what the conversation, like the news stories are,
Okay.
about what's happening globally. Here there's a lot of like Jamaicans in community talking about the ridiculousness of our election
Oh,
um
we could do a whole podcast on that. What do
happening.
you
Like
hear?
we're just
You know?
we're just and there is some type of like relationship agginess that's happening between the US and Jamaica in this moment. And I'm not sure like what the foundational roots of that are.
Okay.
But um but but what this is looking like to me is that there are test markets, right? And it's like the proof of concept, which one is going to work and what's going to be allowed that the masses are not really going to stand against.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is scary because we are on the brink of war.
Mm-hmm.
And war right now, to your point, with the level of technology that we have, with some of the things that technology is talking about releasing in the future,
Yeah.
would mandate, I was having a really good conversation last night about this, would mandate a certain level of control over human bodies and autonomy of movement
Right.
that we need to start putting the pieces together to see that the pathway has already been laid
Yep.
and we're moving along that way. So what are our strategies going to be to make sure that we can ensure that we are maintaining some component of control over our existence? I don't
Yeah.
know how else to say that.
Oh,
I mean,
I
Gen Z has tapped into it a little bit better than
right.
we have because they're just like, y'all want me to do something for what? Somebody else is controlling my whole being,
Right. Right.
right? And that's how they exist. And like the psychology of that is also like really bearing down. I know my young person don't like to go out and be in the world because it's just too wild.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I work with an organization that we're having lots of conversations about this and encouraging people to, and we talked earlier about the sense of, I can't, there's nothing I can do. There's just so much
Yeah.
and I'm overwhelmed. We need to keep doing what we're doing, and we also need to take care of ourselves and build community and build relationship.
Mm,
And our society in on US soil often doesn't know, especially white society, we are not taught how to build community because we're taught, and this is, I know this is, I'm speaking just for myself, but in my experience and unpacking my own whiteness, I believe that we're taught in the US to that we don't have to build community because the whole thing is our community, right? We don't have to
mm,
we don't have to prepare for the possibility that our phones won't work and that we won't be able to communicate with our loved ones and that we may lose, basic availability to power and water and things of that nature. And we may need our neighbors. We need to know who our neighbors are. Whiteness is not, that's not anything that is taught. It wasn't taught to me.
mm,
I grew up on the middle of nowhere in North Carolina. We didn't really have neighbors. We did have them, but everybody had kind of like farmland. So neighbors were far apart from each other, but I still didn't know any of them, and
mm,
I don't have that skill set in the times that I've lived in apartments and I've lived in places where neighbors are close by. People ask me, "Oh, do you know so and so? They live in your building, or do you know so and so?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know anybody. I don't know how to do that." And so in our community that I work with here for the kids, we're talking a lot about building community. And there are a lot of us
mm,
that are white in that community, and we are struggling. We're having to learn the skill set of how to build community because it doesn't exist when you think the whole world is your community and you don't have to work for it, and so the both and piece of it, I keep seeing reminders, and it was so pivotal to me, the reminder that people fought against the Vietnam War, the people that were protesting it for 10 years before it ended. We're
mm, mm,
this is dropping. You're listening to the sound of my voice on the 1 year of a genocide in Palestine that we've all been watching happen on our phones, and so 1 year versus 10 years, this has to be a long haul commitment. And we need to be able to do both. We need to be able to keep doing what we're doing and reminding our elected officials that they work for us And we also need to build community in case these tectonic shifts that we're feeling really manifest into the thing that we think they could manifest in, because we're all we've got for each other.
Hmm.
And so it feels incredibly overwhelming for a person like myself who has never had to really consider that the world might come crashing down around my ears, that it would impact me, that I would possibly lose access to things that I have always enjoyed access to as a person of the dominant class in this country. But it's real. And so anybody out there that's listening to my voice that is feeling similar things, we have to keep moving. We have to find our foundation, and if we don't know where it is or how it is, we need to fix that, start working on it, get to know your neighbors, introduce yourself, put yourself out there, because that's who we're going to need around us when this gets really wild. And it's already getting there, but
It's wild.
where it is wild already, but I feel like we're also still living in that place of imagining, like we're seeing the wildness happening and coming and being kind of forecasted, and it still feels like the really wild stuff is a little farther out, but it's coming, and that's a good thing, because it means that we might be able to craft something new. And it's also a very dangerous thing. It's a very scary thing, especially for anyone who lives within, the function of being othered already, just by virtue of something they can't change, like the color of their skin or their ethnicity or where they live or their level of poverty. And so I don't know. I get that's where I live, is kind of
That's
that
real.
in both worlds of
Mhm.
trying to hold on to that hope and doing the things that I need to do to get me to that place, but also realizing the reality of what we're walking into. So,
All right, then. So November 5th happens, November 6th happens, and where do you think that we are in regards to Palestine? Okay, let me put it this way. Donald Trump is in the presidency. What
oh,
is going to happen in Palestine?
I mean, I'm sure it's going to be more of the same. I don't see him changing his course in terms of supporting what Israel is doing, unless it becomes disadvantaged in some way for him. And not even him as the president, but literally him as the orange Cheeto, I mean, that's the only lens he sees through. Kamala might have a different outcome if she feels enough pressure to do so, but yeah, I don't see that. I mean, the pressure is pretty hard right now, and she's still very much in the camp of supporting genocide. They just sent another 8.7
Very
billion.
clearly. I
Yeah.
mean, she
So
openly
yeah. So
communicates that.
I don't see an end for either one.
Hmm.
Either one getting into office, I don't think ends what's happening. Certainly the US support. I just heard something this morning that US has got boots on the ground in support of Israel. I don't know exactly where they are. I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if it was in Lebanon or if it was in Israel, trying to protect Israel from the attacks that are now coming from Lebanon and from Iran. We've got people there. They love to say we don't have boots on the ground, but we do, and
Hmm.
we're going to protect our interests, and it's all about the money.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know how
Yeah.
to answer that question any differently, unfortunately.
Yeah. So either whether it be the Trump ticket or the Harris ticket, we can expect that we're going to continue to see Israel advance in the way that it's advancing, the US being in support of that, and us entering in more conflicts with other countries. The thing that I see with a Trump presidency is using hard power.
Mm,
Well, actually, I actually see that with both candidates.
yep.
that
We will
hard
have the
power.
most lethal military in all the
Yeah,
world.
exactly.
So yeah,
Being
she's
like,
already laid her
yeah,
down on that
powerfully
one.
militant,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
So, like this kind of return to like this hard power, I I see that coming from a very bully position. And when I think about a bully, I'm thinking about someone who recognizes how weak they are, and so they have to push their power and they push their agenda and be overly aggressive and move into conflict to
Yeah.
try to create some positionality for themselves. So I see US imperialism acting in that way as a bully to try to survive in some way.
Hmm.
But I'm also um, aware of in US imperialism and the level of weakness and kind of like the power narrative that we're telling each other. Really curious to see what it looks like for folks in China and allies there and what their positionality is going to be because they have been very strategic about soft power on a global scale. And that means like really developing out infrastructure in a number of places.
Hmm.
So it'll be very curious if if the way that we are playing war and aggression and US imperialism, if we're really positioning ourselves in a bad place because China has much stronger relationships on a global scale and a created a fantastic dependency and kind of debt system that will be interesting to see how war mongering and all of that kind of stuff really impacts our global relationships, what that's going to look like. And I don't know that we haven't really been talking about that, right? We've been talking more about like our uh, uh, our race in the across the globe with China and like all of the the things about trade, but we haven't been looking strategically, or there hasn't been a narrative conversation about like how we're positioning ourselves with U.S. imperialism and real other imperialism that's giving us strong competition and that has better relationships because they've just done a better job of being in relationship to people. People are still holding the US in its power on a level of considering that folks still look to the US because it's supposed to be the land of dreams and all of that. But that is eroding, that narrative, that understanding of the US is eroding very quickly,
And I
especially as we
fully,
continue to support,
yeah,
yeah,
and
Israel.
I fully
And
anticipate that those countries, those powers are going to just fall away when we finally do implode. They're not going to be like,
mhm,
okay, moving on,
mhm,
It's like, I
mhm.
don't see any of
We
these.
are imploding.
Yes, we are.
That's the
And
thing. We're imploding. And
yeah,
people go with winners and who's in
yeah,
position. And
yeah,
so it really is to look at like, okay, China, what y'all doing? You
yeah.
know?
I think the pagers that Israel used as weaponized to
Mm,
blow up in Lebanon were built in China, if I read that correctly. And so yeah,
mm.
there's already, I mean, I wonder if that's part of this just occurred to me that that might be part of the reason why we're holding on to this support of Israel so desperately because we not only do we just as a society believe that colonizing other lands and decimating the people, the indigenous people that live there is fine
Manifest
to do.
destiny. Well, it's the
Yeah.
destiny, right?
But
Hmm.
also just that if we decided to stop supporting Israel and we fell away from that and became the ones that judged what was happening in Israel instead of supporting it, how would that impact the greater global opinion about our country? Because right now that we're standing on that hill and saying, this is us and this is what we do. And, because everybody else thinks that that is the way to go. But as soon as we decide that we're not part of that, then everybody will turn. I wonder if that's a thought process in somebody's mind. Besides the fact that just supporting Israel means supporting oil, it means supporting power, it means supporting you know, that part of the world and keeping that foothold, and we just desperately can't lose that foothold. It doesn't matter how many people die.
Hmm.
And, so that's the reality of who we are.
That is,
Yeah. So
yeah.
today we are holding in our hearts all that have been lost. It will probably be never that we totally know how many people in Palestine have died and will continue to die. And we just want them to know that we are working for a free Palestine, because freeing Palestine frees ourselves. That's my
Let's say it with a little bit of more strength. Free Palestine.
Palestine, free ourselves. Am I allowed to do the fist?
Yes.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks
I
for joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard?
continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck is produced in
give a
collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician
Care so
Water.
much?
See you next time.
Why do I